All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick with a sunny backdrop for him. Today we're going to talk about Steelers-Browns, going to talk Raiders-Dolphins and Seahawks-Rams. But let's start off with Monday Night Football, Broncos-Bills. Maybe the most memorable, well, at least in the discussion, for the most memorable final minutes of a game this season. A complete catastrophe, something that you couldn't take your eyes off of. What do you think of the betting ramifications out of that, Drew? Any way to capitalize on what happened on Monday night?
I mean, I have some serious thoughts about what's going on in Buffalo. But before going there, I just, thank you to the Broncos for being competitive in that game. I probably needed that to help repair some of the damage that was done Sunday day. I think that's the fourth or fifth primetime Russell Wilson game that has just been absolutely bananas. Like, not high quality, but just what in the world is going on, particularly at the end. Hat tip and congratulations to getting a hard-fought win, but there wasn't convincing performance by the Broncos. Much more about what's going on with the Bills, and they fire Ken Dorsey today. And I mean, it's tough for me to find a culprit or a person with the responsible charge who I would put less of this responsibility on than Ken Dorsey. So the fact that he gets fired feels a little bit unjust, which means that I'm pretty much hard out on Sean McDermott at this point. Like, if you don't have control of sort of the situation to the tune of you have to use Dorsey as like the human shield, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this was in no way related to their scheming, their play calling, the development of the talent on the roster. Like, there's 10 other problems in Buffalo before what they were calling on the field. And I'm kind of shocked and surprised even that we are this reactionary where something had to be done. Somebody had to be fired. Somebody had to pay a price because we're not winning as much as we're supposed to. When, this team's been ravaged by injuries. So many of their best players are not coming back. We say it week in, week out, we say it. And still it's just, it's surprising that it has taken this path. And I got to tell you, like, I don't know who's going to step in and call plays, but if Sean McDermott has the vision and gets his kind of preference with the personnel that they currently have available, like, this Bills team is going to go sideways very quickly. And you could say losing 3-4 with the one win being a game where if Chris Godwin turns around, you're 0-4, then yeah, okay. But, I was hoping we could buy low on the Bills down the home stretch. But right now, with this firing, I'm pretty much out on these guys.
Yeah, well, how about Tyrod Taylor completing the final pass or not messing up the timeout situation at the end of the half against the Bills? Like, the fact that they've lost all of these games in the manner that they have, letting Mac Jones drive down the field after they had seemingly won the game against New England. It's just been catastrophe after catastrophe. And look, Drew, I always say that when you have a 12th man on the field, run on special teams, you've got to fire the offensive coordinator because it was definitely his fault. Just a complete mess all around. What McDermott did on that final drive, there's just so many different nuances to how incompetent it was. The fact that they send the zero blitz and it gets home, but they send the zero blitz. Do you know who's like isolated one-on-one on an island? I think against the tight end to one-on-one, and with just between him and the end zone, it's Damar Hamlin, who hadn't played football on defense since he died. And it's like his fifth snap or whatever. He's got a guard in isolation on a zero blitz. And then they sent it again. And I just think that doing it the second time when you'd already pushed them out of field goal range, you don't have Tre'Davious White or Matt Milano or Micah Hyde out there to be able to hold up on the back end or just be a part of the play. And so I don't know what was going on with that second call. I understand that it worked the first time and you're trying to end the game, but I mean, the game is largely in your favor there. And I think that you do, if you want to do that, you do it on fourth down, you do it on the next play. So I don't understand what the Bills were doing there. And then the complete disaster at the end with the 12th man coming on. But last thing on this one, Drew, because there's a lot of chat on Twitter about it last night because it has been such a divisive market. do you think comeback player of the year is done now that Hamlin got on the field, played defense in a very meaningful game and meaningful moment, made a tackle, and just got out there again? Do you think that award is done, or do you think it's still alive?
I don't think there's really scope for anyone to put themselves into this discussion at this point. And I think, the injuries that they're sustained on defense to this, they're not going away. So this is probably not the last time you've seen Hamlin play. I don't know that he needs to play especially well or really needs to have an impactful moment in a game to secure the award. I really just think he needed to be on the roster. And so we're long past that. This is it's a murky award with a very intangible definition of how it gets decided upon. And you had really smart people like Peter King last year voting for Nick Gates because he came back from the most violent of injuries of anyone who did come back. And there's no more violent injury to come back for than what Damar Hamlin has pulled off. So there's going to be a huge voting block that just says easy answer, move on. What else we got?
Yep, I agree. And I think what this award has always been about and the way to handicap it is not that Hamlin's never, to me, been 100% to win, but he's always been more than 60%, which is what the market has had him for a long time. And what last night did was it just raises the bar even higher that someone else would have to clear. In that now the way that Hamlin loses is if Aaron Rodgers miraculously comes back with 3 weeks left in the season and leads the Jets to the playoffs, and it's a medical miracle. Or Josh Dobbs plays like a top 5 quarterback the rest of the way and the Vikings get a 2 seed and win the NFC North. Like, this stuff is just, it's so, and even then in those situations, I still think Hamlin probably wins anyway. So I think what last night did was it just dispelled a lot of the counter argument against him, which was that, he hadn't played on defense and he's just running around on special teams. Last night completed the comeback. Like, he died on defense making a tackle, and he was out there last night on defense making a tackle. And so I think it's come full circle, and I would be pretty stunned now if he lost. I still think it's minus 200. I still think that's a ridiculous price. I think it should be closer to minus 2,000 than minus 200. But anyway, we will talk about that award again if it gets more interesting. Let's talk about Steelers-Browns. The Browns are 4-point favorites. Total is 36.5. Who would have thought a clash towards the top of the AFC North? Do you think the Browns warrant being 4-point favorites?
Definitely not. No, definitely no.
Okay.
This is a rematch. It feels like approximately about 1 million years ago, week 2 when these two teams played, and you had the Browns coming off of an impressive win against the Bengals in week 1, and the Steelers coming in after getting embarrassed by the hands of the 49ers, and that game was sort of the start of what has been a lot of how are the Steelers doing this season, because it took 2 touchdowns and some pretty wild end of game stuff to get that win home for the Steelers. And if they lose that game, are they here kind of in the conversation for a playoff spot? Absolutely not. So this is now closing a chapter on a rivalry that has been a little bit lopsided of late in favor of the Steelers. And I personally think that if you just in the blind took the points in the AFC North in pretty much every matchup we've got so far this season, you're feeling pretty happy about your performance as a handicapper, which is just to say that the familiarity between these teams and the margin between these teams is pretty narrow in a neutral situation. And now you add into the mix the fact that Deshaun Watson, albeit coming off of a very impressive comeback against the Ravens, is dealing with an ankle injury, which will impact his mobility. His mobility, by the way, which is sort of the hallmark of any of the successful performance we've seen from him so far this season. It hasn't all been through the air that Deshaun Watson is wowing us, man. He is very, very reliant on escaping the pocket because he likes to hold on to the ball for a long time. And his scrambling was super important against the Ravens. And just in general, the Browns' ability to kind of diversify their attack on the ground was, a key factor in that effort. So if his mobility is limited in any way, shape, or form, that's a huge red flag. And I also am still prepared for him to be a surprise scratch and this to be the PJ Walker show, because as we know, Deshaun Watson is calling his own number, and if he's not feeling right on Friday morning, then just be prepared for, oh man, maybe we should have gotten PJ Walker some more reps with the ones this week. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think +4 is a decent shot just on the bet of some chaos and uncertainty regarding Watson's health and availability. And then on the flip side, the Steelers' offensive line is performing a heck of a lot better. Myles Garrett was and is always a factor in these sort of games, and he should be a factor in this game, surely. But they are, pass pro that you're getting out of Broderick Jones and the run blocking in particular has been a huge, huge step in the right direction for that unit relative to what Dan Moore was offering. And I think Deontay Johnson being back and being at full strength is a pretty nice matchup against a Browns team that maybe without Denzel Ward. So Steelers and their ability to kind of eke out another 20-17 kind of a win, I'm in. I'm ready to see it. I think +4 is a perfectly fair play. If the Browns win, I don't think this is going to be Browns by margin. And I'm kind of surprised the market is giving us that outside of a field goal. Where are you on this one?
Okay, I think we're a little opposed on this. I think back to what Kenny Pickett served up in week 2 against Cleveland and the fact that that game was in Pittsburgh and the Steelers needed 2 defensive touchdowns to win by 4. And Deshaun was terrible in that game, I thought. And I thought that one of the most material outcomes of the weekend was that in the second half, Deshaun Watson looked athletic again against Baltimore and seemed to know what he was doing. He went 14 for 14 in the second half and drove them down the field against the Baltimore defense, making some pretty key plays to win that game at the end. So I think we'll see with his health. That is always the thing. This guy can't stay healthy for 6 quarters. It just doesn't happen. But if he is full go, I think the Browns are in a different tier to the Steelers if we see that Deshaun, because that looked like the guy who lit up Tennessee as well. And it seems like he might be turning the corner in his tenure as a Cleveland Brown. So I just think as well, the Steelers, a lot of their success too the past couple of games has been their ability to run the ball. They're not going to be able to run the ball on Cleveland, I don't think.
That's true.
I would be pretty surprised if they do that. Cleveland have a top 3 rushing defense, and I don't think Jalen Warren's going to be breaking these chunk plays. Like, they couldn't do anything on the ground against Cleveland the first time they played. I don't really see why that would have changed a lot. I mean, Broderick Jones playing a little bit more, but I mean, he's not Trent Williams or anything. So I think that they're going to struggle to run the ball. I think they're going to have to throw. And the quiet thing about the Steelers is that Kenny Pickett, who was kind of trending in the right direction, he was terrible against Green Bay. And he looked like he was back to the guy who showed up against Cleveland in week 2 in primetime. So I'm not expecting much from Kenny Pickett. I think that also one of the stranger things, just a little kind of niblet from the weekend, is that Cleveland ran the ball really effectively on Baltimore's front. Jerome Ford, 17 for 107. Even though they're down multiple guys on their offensive line. So you're able, you can run the ball on Pittsburgh. I know Cam Hayward's back, so that helps that. But still, I think that just between Cleveland's rushing attack seemingly clicking, between Deshaun looking better, I expect he's probably going to go, given his comment. To be fair, his comments have been lies in the past in terms of his health status. So we'll see about that. But if Deshaun goes, I think Cleveland will win. I just think they're a different tier to Pittsburgh. But I mean, what do you think?
Okay.
Do you think the Cleveland are just kind of more in the muck of the AFC and they're kind of a team that's the same level as the Chargers and the Steelers, or do you think that they're closer to that, Miami, not quite Kansas City, but Miami, that type of level of team?
I don't think this is a huge misprice. I just think it should be 3, and I'm happy to have outside of a field goal. I just think that so I think they're better than the Steelers. I think they're better than the Chargers. I would make them definitely a step below the Dolphins. But I mean, when I account for the absence of healthy tackles and I account for potentially a less mobile Deshaun Watson. I get the Steelers losing the yardage battle by about 150 yards, getting 2 defensive touchdowns and winning by 3. So that's my fare. No, I mean, in seriousness though, that your points are all reasonable, and I have been one thing I've spent a decent amount of time today specifically doing is trying to figure out if there was something specific about what happened with Baltimore's defense in the second half, and really just in general how their rushing defense was so effectively just beaten by a Browns rushing attack that at least with Jerome Fournette out there, it's been awful. Since Nick Chubb moved on, Kareem Hunt's been more effective by a long shot, and seeing Ford succeed was a little weird. So I kind of feel like that was more on the Ravens defense and something they were doing schematically, or an injury that mattered more than people realized. But I like the idea of T.J. Watt lining up against backup tackles in this game with Deshaun Watson, who holds onto the ball too long, hobbling around back there. So I'll take my chances with Mike Tomlin and company to continue the voodoo this year.
Okay, you can have Kenny Pickett. I'll take Myles Garrett. That's fine. I think we will see defensive touchdowns in this game, but I think that it might be on Cleveland's side. I think this might be Kenny Pickett's reckoning, but we'll see. It would be very Steelers to lose this game 31-6 and then rip off a 2-game winning streak and somehow get to 8-4. But ready for anything with this matchup, particularly the uncertainty around Deshaun. All right, before we get to Raiders-Dolphins, a reminder that Sunday Night Football is headed to altitude this week when the Vikings travel to Denver for a battle with Russell Wilson and the Broncos. Coverage of the interconference matchup begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. A suddenly compelling matchup between the Vikings and Broncos. I don't know why Sean Payton thought that he had Zach Wilson as his quarterback last night instead of Russell Wilson. They don't let Russell Wilson do anything with an offense. Just run handoffs to Javonte Williams for 3 yards a pop. Anyway, we'll see what they do against Minnesota.
Shortest targets of average depth of target of his career. It was bizarre watching it live because you're literally like, does he not know that the entire secondary for the Bills is hurt? I don't understand.
Yeah. I think the Broncos are going to win that game. I think the Dobbs sanity is going to have some cold water poured on it, though I hope not for my Kevin O'Connell position. All right, let's talk Raiders-Dolphins. Dolphins 12-point favorites. We talked about how this seemed very low at the 9.5 open. The total is 46.5. Do you think that the Raiders have the scope to keep this within 12?
Man, the disrespect for our Raiders. What is going on?
Your Raiders, not my Raiders. They're your Raiders.
I mean, would you be like, okay, so here's how, the old quote about statistics, lying liars who lie or whatever. Anyway, statistics can be misleading in a lot of ways. If you take week 5 to today, the Raiders defense, Jay, top 6 in EPA per play allowed. This is a unit that's on the come up. But then you kind of dig in a little bit, and they've played Mac Jones, and they've played Tommy DeVito, and they've played Zach Wilson, and they've played some truly bottom-feeding offenses.
Brian Hoyer
in this run here. Brian Hoyer, did they play Brian? No, they have Brian Hoyer.
Sorry, not Brian Hoyer.
Yeah, but they've had just an incredible run, of weak opposing offenses and quarterbacks. And now this is for real. And I think the Dolphins coming in here off of a bye at full strength, by the way, expecting Devin Achane to be back. Achane. This is a disastrous matchup for the Raiders. The Raiders defense gets by on some sound fundamentals and some Max Crosby chaos. And realistically, the Dolphins, with their ability to get the ball out of Tua's hands so quickly and into the hands of just dynamic athletes, is going to be really, really tough for the Raiders to match and counter in any way, shape, or form. If you tell me the Dolphins make this team, the full game total by themselves, I actually wouldn't be surprised. Like, this Raiders defense is in for an absolute rude awakening of the worst kind. And Antonio Pierce has done a nice job in his 2-game stint, really kind of picking these guys up off the floor and really getting them motivated for a couple of contests where they should have beat up on some inferior opponents, and now they got to tussle with the big boys here. And the fact that there's only one win separating these two is kind of insane, because the Dolphins are just a class above. So brutal spot for the Raiders, coming off a primetime game at home against the Jets, and now having to go play in the warmer conditions. Even though it is November here, it's going to be quite warm down in Miami, and I think this sets up pretty much perfectly for every way Miami would want to succeed on offense. And haven't even mentioned their defense potentially bouncing back here. But after a weak first half of the season with the absence of Jalen Ramsey, they looked pretty amazing in Germany against a Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs team. And you know who I hold in less regard than Patrick Mahomes? Mr. Aiden O'Connell. And so I think ultimately, if they can match up against Devontae Adams, no idea how the Raiders are effective moving the ball in this one. And I think the move from 9.5 to 12 is completely fair. And actually, my fair is closer to 13 here. So if you really want to get weird and frisky and lay some points, laying with the Dolphins this week is probably my favorite of the big faves.
Yeah, I like that. I think as well that it went under the radar because it was the Frankfurt game and they lost, but the Dolphins defense looked sick against Kansas City. And I think that Ramsey coming back, I mean, Kansas City had 2 scoring drives in the entire game. They won because they got the ridiculous Tyreek Hill fumble 6, but they couldn't really do anything. And I understand that the Chiefs offense has struggled this year, but I mean, it's still a good offense. It's still Patrick Mahomes. And, there was the previous game before that when Mahomes wasn't on an IV right before the game. They completely decimated the Chargers, and Mahomes looked as good as he has ever looked. And with Mahomes healthy again against the Dolphins, they really, really struggled. And I think that Ramsey coming back just fixes so much of what's wrong with that defense. Now it just pushes everyone further down the pecking order. Now what's left of Xavier and Howard doesn't need to be chasing around the Jamar Chases of the world. With that D-line, with Chubb and Wilkins and Phillips, with Javon Holland, who's having an awesome season at safety, I think this defense is kind of loaded now. And another thing is that Teron Armstead is back too. So the offensive line looks really strong. I don't think there's much separating the Dolphins and any other team in the NFL going forward. And again, another thing that went under the radar because they won the game, Aiden O'Connell was terrible against the Jets. And I understand it's the Jets. And Justin Herbert was terrible.
He made one pass.
Yeah, he looked like he wasn't ready. Even the way he would take off and scramble and slide, it's like, have you played football, Aiden? This one doesn't look normal. I think he is in big trouble in this game. And yeah, I would be stunned if they keep this one at all close. So I agree. I think this is going to close closer to 4th. I think it's going to close 13.5, to be honest. I don't know who is taking the Raiders. I mean, there's still some 11.5 about. I cannot imagine a worse way to spend my Sunday than only getting an 11.5 point head start with the great Aiden O'Connell. All right, before we go to Seahawks-Rams, a reminder, Saturday, November 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern, Vaughn Dalzell, Brad Thomas, and Eric Froton are answering college football betting questions for Week 12, including Brock Bowers and Georgia traveling to Neyland Stadium for a showdown against SEC East rival Tennessee. All right, one of the weirder games of the week, I think, Seahawks at Rams. Looks like Stafford will go. Don't know what full capacity he will be in, but it seems like he is going to play. If he does struggle or get hurt again, at least they will have the immortal Carson Wentz backing him up instead of whatever's left of Brett Rippon. But when they played in Week 1 in Seattle, Seahawks were 6-point favorites, 5.5-point favorites in that one, and the Rams
5 close 6, yeah.
Yep, and the Rams destroyed them. What do you make of this game? Because this line is saying that these two teams are, pretty close to identical and neutral.
Yeah, I lost a lot of money on that game, Week 1. I definitely thought that the Seahawks were going to be a little feistier in that contest, but they laid down in the second half. And, part of that was they had a couple offensive line injuries. Part of that was because they made 0.0 adjustments for what the Rams, brought out offensively. Puka Nacua, basically made his entire rookie campaign in that one game. And it was pretty deflating to see the Seahawks get beaten that badly. And I honestly have no idea how to currently rate the Seahawks. I thought last week was pretty telltale perfect opportunity for them to bounce back. You have a young quarterback in Sam Howell who is susceptible to pressure. If you want to bring some exotic blitzes, let him rip, make him make some mistakes, make him take some sacks. Didn't really see any of that. Seahawks instead went a lot more base and really just got beaten, really at the tail end of that game, pretty convincingly. And if their offense doesn't, I guess really if Ron Rivera is a little bit more careful about his time management at the end of that contest, the Seahawks don't have a chance to come down and score the game-winning field goal. But that was about as uninspiring a win as I can recall from the entire slate last week. And I think the one boom play that they got from Kenneth Walker, that's not really repeatable stuff. And the lack of chemistry between Geno and his wide receivers it's palpable. Like you could just see too many wasted downs where he's just throwing it over guys' heads. He doesn't have confidence in his guys getting open. And the Rams basically, put on a clinic week one of saying, hey, we're going to play the style of defense that really frustrates your quarterback and make him make some mistakes. And I don't see why that wouldn't happen again. And then on the flip side, if you're going to give, if you're not able to generate pressure with your front four, then you're giving Matt Stafford time to pick you apart, and you play a style of coverage without any kind of wrinkles, any kind of, disguising. He's going to have an absolute field day here. So if his thumb is 100%, and he's working with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua now, an even stronger set of weapons against the Seattle Seahawks defense. I really don't know why this isn't deja vu all over again, where the Rams get a pretty comfortable win. And I know the market has moved now to making them small favorites. We're seeing minus 115s in the money line right now, which says they got about a 55% chance to win this game, and I think that's pretty realistic. And so I'm not dying to get involved one way or the other here. I think, if this gets to 1.5, I'll probably tease the Seahawks and just kind of hold my breath there. But, Seahawks have a pretty important game on deck next week on Thanksgiving against the Niners. And I don't think that's necessarily something that they would be looking past this Rams team towards that potential matchup. But, I could see the Seahawks stumbling here. How many weeks ago did we say this? The Seahawks they're locked into the 6th seed in the NFC, in my opinion. I don't think there's any realistic chance they'd run down the Niners. There's no realistic chance they'd run down the 5 seed, and the 7 seed is going to finish with 8 or 9 wins. So, Seahawks are pretty much in cruise control to be touchdown dogs against the Lions or the Niners or the Eagles in the wild card round, and probably lose by double digits.
Yeah, I think right now the problem with Seattle is just that Geno has settled into being the 16th, 17th best quarterback in the NFL behind a pretty bad offensive line. And when that's your starting point on offense, even though they have good weapons in Metcalf and Lockett and JSN and Ken Walker, just the fact that Geno has never really rediscovered that first 5 weeks, MVP candidate level play from last year, I think it just caps their ceiling, particularly when, on defense, there was the idea a couple of weeks ago that, maybe this is a top 8-9 defense. Maybe this is just a really good defensive unit. And then Baltimore just absolutely annihilated them. And they didn't really cover themselves in glory against the Commanders either. And now I think it's just it's a solid defense. It's slightly above average, perhaps, with, a really strong secondary with Devin Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen anchoring that, but they haven't had a pass rush in years. And I don't think Leonard Williams really moves the needle. Leonard Williams is like the Blazers with Dame adding Jeremy Grant. It's like, all right, what is it? Like, it doesn't really do anything for you here. I don't guess he's good and helps out, but is it really worth it? So I think that this game largely hinges on Stafford's health. And given that variable, I prefer Seattle as a dog. I think it's also instructive. The last 2 times we've seen Stafford healthy, the Rams were getting completely eviscerated by the Cowboys. And then before that, they lost at home to Kenny Pickett and the Steelers. So it's not like they were playing brilliantly either. So, yeah, I don't really see it for the Rams. And if Stafford is not 100%, then I think the Seahawks will win.
Yeah, the Stafford question mark is huge, but I will say that some of the Rams' degradation in terms of performance heading into their bye was offensive line health related, and Rob Havenstein should be back. And in general, with 2 weeks to really prepare for a pass rush that can't necessarily get home even against bad offensive lines, I think that actually does give the Rams a little bit more of a shot here. And it's still a pretty decent coaching mismatch. Pete Carroll has kind of gotten his pocket picked by McVay for a while now, and maybe there is some wrinkle that the Seahawks have been saving for this rematch. But I'm pretty unimpressed right now with what their vision is in terms of who they want to be as a team.
Yeah, this is like the rich man's version of Panthers Bears, where it just feels like kind of an irrelevant matchup, but one that's going to be relatively well played between two solid quarterbacks, and ultimately is going to have next to no bearing on the outcome of the season. I think we'll see. Maybe the Seahawks will go into San Francisco on Thanksgiving and make themselves very relevant, but I think we kind of saw their true face revealed when they got absolutely stomped by the Ravens. So I don't think there's a ton there with the Seahawks. I think this is a 10-7 wild card type of team that, to your point, will make great fodder for whoever the 3 seed is, whether that's Detroit or San Francisco or whatever, particularly if it's San Francisco. I think it's just going to
anyone but San Francisco. Dude, you know how bummed I'm going to be if we get a third Niners-Seahawks game this year? Really. Anything. Like San Francisco, please figure out a way to get to 14-3 and get the 1 or the 2 seed, please. I really don't want to see a third Niners game against the Seahawks.
Yeah, I've already seen the outcome to that. It's going to win 34-17 because that's how it feels like
yes.
games.
Exactly.
All right. With that, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe if you're listening to us in podcast form. And a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.